Welcome to Central News. My name is Tim Masemola. Today we are going to be talking to Bongani Baloyi, who is the president of Xiluva and former mayor of Midvaal. We're going to be touching on the current political debate developments in the country, and amongst them, we are going to be talking about the renaming of William Nicol. We are also going to be discussing about the passing of Zoleka Mandela. It's some of the few things that we're going to be talking about today. Ndade Baloyi, welcome to Central News.
Well, morning. I think it's still morning still. Thank you for having me on Central News, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Ndade Baloyi, your party's position on the renaming of William Nicol to Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and the reaction from parties like ANC, EFF, and Patriotic Alliance.
Look, we welcome the renaming of William Nicol Road. More so, even deep understanding what the man William Nicol stood for and his beliefs, and more so how he was a collaborator and defender of the apartheid regime. So we welcome that, and I think it's quite appropriate as we build towards redressing our society to also rename these public infrastructure. But we believe that such infrastructure, I mean, when you apportion the name of someone as important and has contributed immensely to our body of politics and the liberation of our country, our government needs to take a step forward by naming new infrastructure that it has built and not renaming, but rather naming it appropriately with such leaders. So not just the old, we need to start naming the new with and naming them appropriately, but changing the names of those who were collaborators of the apartheid. We can never whitewash all of our history, but it's important that these landmark and significant infrastructure be named appropriately.
Can you elaborate on the significance of renaming the road after Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and how will this impact the people of Johannesburg and the country as a whole?
Look, I think we must firstly appreciate who William Nicol was and his role as a contributor and defender of the apartheid regime, which sought to segregate and underdevelop Black people in the main, but equally subjugate Black people. So when you rename such a public road and such a busy road to a name that's much more appropriate, a name that has contributed immensely to the country and its liberation and fought so gallantly, I think that is appropriate. It's something we'll always defend because we are aware of the fact that the deep scars that apartheid has inflicted on all of us, and some carry lived experience, some carry generational experience, and the traumas that we've been told or informed about by our parents, by our grandparents. So I think it's a very important mark by renaming. But beyond that, we are saying it's not enough to rename the old with leaders and those who have contributed. It's important to build new and name those new infrastructure that represent who we are and how we respond to our modern day complex challenges by building super infrastructures and naming those appropriately with people and persons who have contributed immensely towards the liberation of our people in our country.
Do you believe renaming some of these streets will have an impact on these people that will be saying we're commemorating them? What impact will it have?
Look, I don't think there would be. No one is making the argument that there's an economic benefit or there's a financial benefit to renaming. But remember, names are very important. And names remind us of those persons, and we keep reliving their names and bringing them back to life in after they've passed on. So it's important to change these things, and more so for people who did these atrocities against the majority of the people in our country. I think it's very important as we redress our society and build a common society. And build a society where we can be a nation coming from a divided past. And we can't be united by names which have actually contributed towards the subjugation and also the apartheid on Black people. So no one is making the case of economic benefit or financial benefit, but it's about redress and building a country. And building a country requires decisive steps to be taken to look beyond just what current now, but actually find a space and time where all of us can come together.
Yes, but what are practical considerations in terms of infrastructure, logistics, or costs?
There are costs because you have to change the name. You need to update that on Google Maps or maps of the city, change names, and that whole registration process. There are those practical, logistical, and financial constraints, not constraints, but rather factors that that the city will have to deal with in doing this. But remember, I mean, building a nation requires us to take some of these decisive steps in building together and bringing people together. But most importantly, we cannot still in 2023 still be recognizing apartheid symbols of apartheid as if it's common cause. And part of the deeper problem, my brother, is that we actually have done ourselves an injustice as Black people because we've not been taught our history properly. If our history we were taught properly and we were taught deeply about what happened in apartheid, from before apartheid, the colonialism, and those people and persons, I can tell you we would be so conscious of these names that it will take a natural process just to change their names, because we don't want to be calling these people and bringing them up. And all these things at this day and age.
As a leader of your political party, how will you prioritize name changing compared to the other pressing issues in your political party? Can you provide the insights into the broader vision of your party and its goals at the national level?
Look, let me first ask the question, what is Xiluva? Answer the question right. Xiluva is a party that believes that has selected Ubuntu as a political ideology. Many people ask us, firstly, why do you call it in a Tsonga indigenous language? As an example. Why is it, do we think that you can't say Kipali, you can't say Himbali, but you must say the Association of Freedom Fighters, blah, 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 blah. So we are saying we are those Blacks who are saying it's enough. Just assimilate and taking the cultures of others. And using the knowledge of our ancestors. Now, Ubuntu, many people misunderstand Ubuntu. They talk as if Ubuntu is just humanism. Ubuntu is not just humanism. Then they quote, I am because we are, and they leave it there. You know, we've gone further and deeper and we said, but Ubuntu is three things. Ubuntu, Abantu, Umuntu. Remember, in the African language, before Uba Mutu, Uba part of Batu.
Yes.
You get it? So Uba part of Batu, it means you contribute to the collective good of the society, Nabantu, That's why you'll also find examples when they say, so before you are Umuntu, you are part of Abantu. And as you are Umuntu, part of Abantu, there's also the physical side of you, there's also the spiritual side of you. And we engage on physical, on things that on the things that make sense for us physically, whatever it is in your pursuing of your own agents in your path. Spiritually, whether Mandlos or African spirituality and many others prefer other things, we don't decide. But I'm starting with the first part, which is Muntu Abantu. The second part is Sintu. Isintu, which governs us as Abantu. These are the laws of our forefathers. That's how I should so those things are very important to us. The third aspect is amasiko. Amasiko, khona izinto ezenziwa kaBaloyi nabaHadebe ezingenza komunye imizi. So liyafapafapana based on where you come from. So we are saying ukuthi Ubuntu is those three things in the main. And then we ask ourselves the question, then who is the custodian of Ubuntu? And then we are saying the custodian of Ubuntu is Amakhosi. Amakhosi working with the state, right? And then now you realize then you're going back. So now we're actually going back to 1910, 1913. When an important thing happened with the Natives Land Act, disposition of land for Black people, and former Union of South Africa, then the Republic of South Africa, and then Black people are put on the side, and all those things happening. And the persons who were actually part of the natural system of governance for so we are saying we need to bring back that element. Amakhosi right now are not actively part of the state at a level which makes sense.
I was about to ask you the same question, that do you think that Marenarona have been given space in terms of contribution in terms of the running of the government?
No, Marena Arona have been on exile since 1910.
Okay.
So even after, even after there was the issue of the CODESA negotiations, so they were excluded. They were looking, it was politicians, and politicians then did something sneaky. They apportioned or appropriated themselves power via the constitution and took power via our Marena Arona. So we are saying to get things working, we need to effectively get a Marena Arona united, coordinated, working together, but at a level being part or integrated as part of the state and creating a different system of democracy. A democracy for us that includes Marena Arona. Remember, the other part that's when you speak about the custodian, we also say the land is also the custodian under, or I mean, Marena Arona, the custodian of land. When we speak of land, we speak three things in the main. Three. One, we say what is beneath the land, what is on top of the land, and the laws that govern. So yeah, and the minerals, but equally the laws that govern. Why is it that me and you are under Roman, Dutch, and British law, and yet we are in Africa and South Africa? And the laws of your own forefathers, you don't even know them, you don't even care about them. The government has created a thing called customary law, which is subservient to the constitution and other laws, but these things conflict. That's why Marena Arona sabona anganamandla ukuthi azimele. Abanye bayazibathola ama-stipend, but holistically, Marena Arona, the institution ya Marena Arona kaofela has been put on exile and powers have been taken by politicians. So we are saying, as Xiluva, we are going about this differently. We don't have an interest on socialism, communism, all the other isms. But we are going back to the wisdom of our ancestors because we believe that there's a case to be made, and we believe there are many who believe in what we believe, and we need to co-govern this country, the Marena Arona. So, we have a deeper understanding of Botho than when people say it's just about harmony. But you know, when you listen to some people say, they think when they speak about Ubuntu, they refer to some Africans sitting under a tree, Banam Komboti, Babu Wafela wearing animal skin, but not really into governance. I mean, Botho dictates that before Romangwana to perform a task, you must select your best. So the same thing with leaders. So you don't deploy in government your worst. That's not Ubuntu. You deploy your best to go and serve on behalf of. So there's a number of things that this Western democracy has done to us, which has made us cannibalize each other as Black people. So moving away from that and including the things that matter to us was going to help us. That's why Chinese are saying communism with Chinese characteristics. What shall you feel about it? They are blending their own things to things that they see. Oh, hey, Rona, we don't do that. Rona renka fela, rebonking fela, siatata, siasimule. We don't stop and think and say, but this thing is not helpful for us.
But how do we include them within the current system? Because we don't even know some of Marena Arona nowadays, because there are only few who are recognized. Just to mention the few, I know even a small child will tell you that about the Zulu king, but he will never tell you about others. There are others, but somewhere we don't even know about them. How do we say, where do we start? How do we include them?
Firstly, we need to coordinate Marena Arona into an institution that becomes part of the state. Right now, you only find them being part of National House of Traditional Leaders, and then you provincially got a thing called Contralesa, which gives some input. They go and listen, Marena Arona, they get a stipend, that's it. So now we are saying you are moving from there, but co-governing with the politicians now. And remember, Rona, no one is creating a buffer. No one is protecting us. You find what should have happened is that Rona should have been the buffer between the politicians and the people. And being able to say, but what you are doing now is incorrect. The laws you are passing are eroding our morality. This sits for Sarona because you are making things where there's implications if you consider African spirituality and where we are for the decisions you are making. For a 13-year-old, abortion, once so implications. So some of these things that we pass laws that appear to be progressive, but we don't consider the African interpretation and the spirituality of it. So even back then, Marena Arona were leading with people who were able to advise them and guide them. spirituality and how to manage things. So we are saying, Rona, we are going back to the wisdom of our ancestors. We need to coordinate Marena Arona and also ensure that they participate at the level of the senior part of the state and working with politicians, but they need to be coordinated, organized. So we need to see each other as Africans, not Zulu, Bedi, Inging, as Barena, and say, how do we take the country forward? If we are united, Barena and politics, my brother, will be a formidable country. No one will be able to do what they want in this country because we'll be moving with all the leaders that are relevant and should be part of making decisions at the senior level and leading this country together.
This is very much interesting, but we have to move on with our discussion. Let us go back to Tshwane. The issue of the President Cyril Ramaphosa instructing the SIU to investigate the 295 million tender. What's your reaction on that?
We welcome it. Remember, I'm the one who submitted the complaint formally to the SIU when I was still with the other party. So it's late, but we welcome it. I think it's really going to assist in getting to establish what the facts are and what really happened and hold people to account, because what happened then is affecting Black people. You know, the sad thing about our current state is that the Black lives are cheap, my brother. I can guarantee you, if such a thing happened and the water in Centurion was the one that's contaminated, I can tell you that it wouldn't have taken as long as it has taken because it's Black people. So for us, it's Black people's lives are very cheap. And their pain is very cheap as well. And the state responds in a very slow manner and not proactive and deal with the things decisively. Today, still people in Hammanskraal are struggling with water. You can't even drink the water coming out from those taps in Hammanskraal. And you've got a government, you've got the national government, you've got provincial government, you've got local government, and then the city, which is besieged by infighting coalitions that are not making any headway. People are watching this mess. They're saying, for how long? So we welcome this, and we would implore the city to actually move quickly in providing water through sustainable mechanisms, but equally finding short to medium term options for people to get potable water. I mean, this is water, my brother. This is something very important, human right, this thing.
How do you think that this corruption probe will impact the city of Tshwane and its residents?
I think it will unmask what really happened and who had the sufficient, was tasked with protecting the city and doing what they should and did not do. And when things went wrong, who did what and did not do what. So it will help us get accountability, transparency, which is good, so people can be held accountable. But we also hope that it will also come with strong recommendations of how you can tighten up internal controls, because internal controls in a city, if they don't work, things like this can happen. Now imagine what's happening with other things. I suspect that with many other projects in the city, costing amounting to billions, similar things are happening. So this will just open the door so we can understand what's happening, and we hope that residents of Tshwane can get justice, most of residents of Hammanskraal. I think there has to be criminal prosecution for people who have caused this.
Your party, for in future, in terms of making sure that we don't see such things happening again, how can this be prevented?
Look, I think firstly, you need to appoint people who are competent and capable to do the job. But as we see the state playing an even bigger role in the delivery of some basic services and leading of some investing in infrastructure. So we see the private sector with the state, but the state will play a bigger role. I think we've seen that if you remove the incentive of corruption, which is used through tenders, and the state does it itself, so we need to capacitate the state and remove the oxygen that feeds tenderpreneurs, feeds politicians, feeds administrators, by the state doing that and leading that. And I think the state can have capacity to be able to roll out these key infrastructure developments across the country, and more so starting in failing municipalities. Because we've seen that if you leave things to private sector alone, my brother, people like to think that those people are those people, and you will be surprised. It's not just people who look like me and you, they protect each other. So we must count things like that to ensure that we put the lives and the development of the country first above individual interest.
Do you think the president's action on the matter is sufficient, or do you believe that the more can still be done?
Look, I think they need to investigate. Naturally, when you investigate, it's something that has happened. I think they could have intervened. I think provincial government could have intervened decisively, and they failed and reneged on their responsibility to do so. Because before something could have happened for so many years, someone should have seen it. Someone should have raised the alarm. Someone should have mitigated. Someone should have seen the risk and done something about it. But none of these people did. So I think the present intervening at this level is appropriate, and we'll hope for a speedy and decisive investigation and people to be held accountable.
Do you think that this corruption probe will affect the public trust in the government institutions?
I think the fact that there's so much corruption happening and lack of service delivery, people's sense of trust in government has been eroded. Remember, the thing that builds the legitimacy of state is in its substance, and substance is in its delivery. So if people don't trust the state to deliver, it erodes the belief and the trust that they have on the state. So the state currently led by the ANC is facing a serious legitimacy threat, rightly so, for all that they have done and for the material conditions we find ourselves in today.
This one is going to be more interesting. You were once mayor in the Midvaal. And were you actively involved in addressing corruption within the Midvaal? And what are the things that you did in terms of making sure that you don't see corruption continuously happening?
Look, we started to unbundle a lot of big tenders to give competition, because you found that in Midvaal, one company for almost 8-10 years was getting 80% of this thing. And then you start to say, but this thing doesn't make sense. Why one company for almost 10 years getting the same tenders, which is 80% of the capex? So unbundle this thing so others can compete. So we started to see a greater level of competition, and competition is good because you also get best prices and people who are innovative who can do the work as well. And you move away from the thing that controls the entire capex of the municipality, about 80%. And we started doing a lot of probity on managers in key infrastructure departments, and people were held accountable when things happened where they signed off purchase payment certificates, and meanwhile things are not done. So we dealt with those things. We're not even afraid to speak about them. So when we found instances of corruption, we dealt with them. But the thing that I really learned as being part of a municipality like Midvaal is that politicians and senior leaders must always be obsessed about how you improve internal controls and how you prevent. So you think ahead. You know the human behavior and how they're moving. So you try and think ahead to keep improving your internal controls, so you make it difficult. So the game we're playing in Midvaal was, how do I make it extremely difficult for thieves to thrive? And I really think I did well in that regard.
Okay. Many people are talking about, let us unbundle it. And some of normal community members or members of the society say, can you elaborate more when you say you and unbundled it? What are you talking about? Can you explain it further?
So when we unbundle, I mean, we had one service provider that was appointed for work that constituted 80% of the capex budget. It means roads, sewer projects, roads projects, paving projects, electrification projects, all sorts of infrastructure you can think of. 80% one company, and it did not make sense. So it tells you that now this thing is captured. It tells you that everything is now, I mean, you can't keep the same company winning continuous, there's nothing wrong. And we are saying as government, we also want to create a fair environment for people to compete. And competition is important. So I saw that this thing is unhealthy, and being unhealthy, I must do something about it and ensure that when you approve when I approve the process of following through now I'm trying to remember this process, the tenders for the year, and because what we do as politicians, you monitor and measure the outcomes and performance of capex. So for us to achieve maybe a 95% of capex, I must monitor from when the bid spec has said, from when they've approved this, from when they've approved that. So when you monitor those milestones as it is in our SDPIP, then you show performance, then you start to see, but there's something wrong. Why is it the same person all over the paper here doing capex? For water, the same person, sewer, same person, roads, paving, same thing, electrification, the same thing. Why is it the same people? So you start to find those things. So that's why you need politicians who understand, who are educated, who can read and interpret and be able to have foresight with an internal environment and understand the shifts and changes that are happening. So you can preempt things, you can prevent things, and you can mitigate. That's what you need. So then you get involved in things and understand what, the institution behaves like this. For the past 4 years, it has behaved like this. So I must change this. To change this, I must change either something in the service delivery budget implementation plan, or in the standard operating procedures, or in various other forums that one chaired as a mayor then. So I'm using that example just to expand a little bit to show you that it's a complex thing. So you are managing while you are running 150 kilometers per hour as the executive mayor, and providing that guidance from a policy perspective, but equally from a performance management and monitoring element.
Yes. Moving on, one of the things that many South Africans are still talking about even today is the passing of Zoleka Mandela. With the recent passing of her, can you share maybe any potential reflection or comments on her?
Look, I think what a lovely human being with the spirit of fighting against injustice, and actually someone who was dedicated to a cause that she has been part of. I mean, someone we know who comes from an incredible bloodline of strong women. So she represented that of being a strong woman who fights and who stands her ground as well, and has been there to support her mother and her family as well. So we all saw and observed through the years her growth and how she has fought and stood beside people that she cared about and fought for the things she feels strongly about. And we share our sincere condolences to her family, to her friends and her colleagues. I think she fought her fight, and she's done what she can on this earth with the time she was given. And we just wish her that she continue inspiring and living in our memories. So her bloodline also inspires and remembers and reminds us what we need to do and how we need to conduct ourselves.
Lastly, let us talk about the cemetery view fire. You came out gun blazing about it, saying that the people must be given accommodation, and more especially one of the things that you mentioned was even for school kids, they must not be away from school for a very long time. And we know that in Tshwane, that coalition is being led by the Democratic Alliance. What are other things that you may maybe want to mention with us that you want them to happen as soon as possible?
Look, I think firstly, there has to be a financial stabilization of the city, number one. Because a city capital city that is not financially sustainable and viable is a danger. And it would be deeply embarrassing to see a capital city in the Republic of South Africa collapse due to financial mismanagement as a consequence of the DA's long run of mismanagement in Tshwane and various others who have been part of them over the years. So we would want, firstly, to resolve the financial sustainability of the city. Number two, to resolve the leadership challenges in the city. You know, sometimes what many people don't appreciate, when you see a mess happening outside in the city, you must always know that there are politicians who are fighting. I can guarantee you now, with what's happening in the city, you have division within the executive currently there. And I would not be surprised if it's amongst your DA members who are contesting for the seat of being mayor, using officials, using labor, and using the public. So one is seen as incompetent, and then the public sentiment will change against the one and in favor of the other. That is very likely. But equally, the city of Tshwane has been a minefield in corruption and all sorts of things happening there, where politicians are in cahoots with some officials, and officials are in cahoots with politicians for extraction of resources into the city. So the city is currently under severe challenges, but there's a project of extracting resources in the city of Tshwane, which we would like the city leadership to deal with immediately and stabilize the city of Tshwane. But most importantly, the city must remember that they've got millions of residents who deserve services, as their mandate is to deliver services. And in this specific case, I mean, it's unfortunate that the fires engulfed the area in question now and affected lives of people. So it's only Ubuntu that says we must look after those who have been tragically affected by things such as those. And people did not come here because they want to, but because they're in search of better economic opportunities, housing opportunities, and better lives for their families and livelihoods. So it's important for cities to plan for this ahead of time, ensure there's infrastructure deployment that caters for the growth of cities. So now that we don't have leaders that stay too long to be able to plan for these things, you find eventualities like this starting to happen and causing disaster and losing of human lives and livelihoods, which is really unfortunate.
We've seen people staying for days without electricity. Do you think the city will be able to deal with the matter as soon as possible?
They have to. It's their mandate to deal with things such as disaster, which the budget has been apportioned appropriate to them via the provincial government. So it's their mandate to do so. Unfortunately, they have been failing spectacularly, the city of Tshwane, in various scores, unfortunately. And they've been going through some challenges with labor as well, which has exacerbated their failures. But you can't blame all of their failures and labor challenges. The city of Tshwane has been threatened and under threat for a lot of time, and also severely suffering severe lack of leadership and continuity of leadership, which creates the current material conditions for failures to continue and for ineptitude to be praised and thrive in the city. So it's not a matter of whether they must or not, they have to deliver. It's their competence.
From your side, as the political party, are there plans in place trying to force the city maybe to deal with the matter effectively?
We are obviously looking at their implementation and how quickly they get on the ground. We have our structures on the ground constantly monitoring, and at the level appropriate, we'll be able to take a decision to compel and approach the law, the courts of law, to compel the city to deliver those services to people.
It's been nice talking to you. What is your last message to the people of South Africa?
Look, we are saying to the people of South Africa, the time to vote for Nelson Mandela is gone. The time to vote for struggle icons is gone. Now it's the time for you to vote for yourself and your children. And you can't do the same thing continuous and hope for a different result. That is insanity. The Oxford Dictionary tells us that it's insanity to do the same thing and expect a different result. Now we must exercise the power that we have, and we must get young people to be part of shaping and co-creating their futures by taking responsibility and participating. And we are asking our parents for a change to put our lives and futures first. They have voted for people who are their peers. Now it's time for them to vote for their grandchildren, their children, which is us. Xiluva is that party of ethical leadership, a party of Ubuntu that appreciates and understands what needs to be done, and a party that's led by someone who understands governance and who has led a public institution and led one of the best performing municipalities in the country. So we're appealing to the residents of South Africa that the time for us to consider the ANC as part of our future is gone. We must consider them as part of our past. Now let's be selfish. Go and vote for yourself, vote for your children, and vote for Xiluva.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.